Hi guys, Mrs. Karaz here. Today we're starting Chapter 18, Industry and Urban Growth. And Section 1 is a new industrial revolution. Okay, so at this point in history, America is primed for a new industrial revolution. And there are a few different factors that contribute to that. So first of all, we have deposits. Sorry, I kicked my desks. There are deposits of coal, iron, lead, and copper that had been discovered by prospectors and miners. So we can take that raw material, manufacture it to turn it into something new and useful. We also have the settling of the Northwest, which contains lots of lumber. Again, raw material is what we're deriving from those trees in the Northwest, and we can use them to produce other manufactured goods. There were subsidies from the government being given, which meant, remember, grants of land and money that could be used towards industrialization, starting new factories, building new machinery. And we also had tariffs or taxes on imports at this time, which meant that foreign goods were more expensive than goods that were American made. You had to pay a little extra money if you wanted to buy something made outside of this country. So, of course, maybe to save money, it's a good idea to start producing more things within our country, and then you don't have to pay those higher taxes on those goods. So one big advance at this time came in the form of the Bessemer process. And the Bessemer process, we're not going to need to know the exact steps to this process. But the bottom line is it was a cheap way to make strong steel. Previously, it took a lot of time and money and effort to make steel that was really durable and could stand up strong. The Bessemer process changes that. You can very quickly make cheap steel efficiently, not inefficiently. And this helps steel become the #1 building material in cities and industries. We'll see in a future section what changes happen because steel becomes so popular. And at this time, Pittsburgh became the nation's steel-making capital. If you're a football fan, you will now understand why the Pittsburgh Steelers are called what they are. Another material that is very important at this time is oil. The first oil strike took place in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859. And originally, oil was only used to lubricate gears and machinery. Keep them from locking up on each other. You would put oil in there and help things run smoothly. But later, oil started being used as a power source for cars and engines. And that's how it's used today. And it's really valuable in that capacity today. Oil was in fact called black gold because it is so valuable. It's an important fossil fuel that has a lot of uses, but there are a limited supply. So again, if you are finding oil, you're making a lot of money. It is essentially black gold. You are making yourself rich if you discover oil. Looking at the railroad boom, which shouldn't surprise you from what we looked at last chapter and the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad. So at this time, railroads and industry helped each other, right? Railroads would ship goods, which benefited both the industry that created those goods and the railroads that were shipping them, right? They worked together. Big railroads at this time wanted to limit competition in order to keep charging high prices. If you have a lot of competitors, right, your customers have a choice. Are they going to buy from you, or are they going to buy from the person who charges $5 less than you for the same good? So big railroads wanted to charge high prices, and they knew that meant they had to limit their competition. So what did they do? So sometimes they consolidated or combined together to form just one company. And in that case, the owner of Railroad A and the owner of Railroad B would come together, and they would be partners, and they would work together to drive their new consolidated company forward. There's also the fact that sometimes larger rail lines would buy out smaller rail lines or force them out of business. So owner A could pay owner B $100,000 and say, hey, your company's mine, you're unemployed, enjoy retirement. That's another option. Some railroads gave secret discounts to their best customers. So if there was a farmer that always had to ship, a massive amount of wheat, instead of lowering prices for everyone, the railroad would say, hey, we like you, we want to keep your business, we'll give you a discount, and everyone else would have to pay a high rate still. And sometimes rival railroads would even work together to agree to charge high prices, right? So if Railroad A is charging, $10 per mile, I don't quite know a good example here, rival B would say, okay, I'll also charge $10 per mile, even if they could do the work for $5 per mile. So all of this goes to say that, things were going really well for railroads and the people who own them. It wasn't going so well for small farmers who were stuck actually paying fees to the railroads, and that's why things like the National Grange, which we saw in last chapter, developed. Okay, moving on to some technological innovations at this time. So we're getting new inventions at this time, and we need to protect those inventions. And that's where we get the idea of a patent. A patent is a document that gives someone the sole right to make and sell an invention. It's a legal document saying, hey, you thought of this, you can create it, you can produce it, no one else could steal your idea. So patents really help to protect an inventor's idea. No one else could steal or take credit for his or her work. No one else can benefit or profit from it. It helps protect the inventor and the work that he or she did. Moving on to some big inventions at this time. So starting with Thomas Edison. We know he invented the light bulb and some other important devices, but his most important contribution at this time period, he opened the first electrical power plant in 1882. And this is the first time that American citizens really have a reliable source of energy, electricity that they can depend on. Once we can depend on electricity, we can start building things that use it into our daily lives, right? So I know that, I have an electric iron that just plugs into the wall, and that's how it heats up. Before reliable energy like that, no one would waste their money on an electrical iron. You would find other ways to heat it. So new inventions can be made now that this source of electricity is reliable and the people can depend on it. In 1876, we have Mr. Alexander Graham Bell inventing the telephone. It was based on technology from the telegraph. The telegraph allowed you to send messages using a code of dots and dashes. Obviously, the telephone is different. It lets you send your voice. And this actually became the most valuable patent in history. It was technology that people immediately connected with and immediately wanted access to. And very quickly, the use of the telephone spread throughout the United States. Other significant inventions in 1868, Christopher Sholes invented the typewriter. This made office work faster and cheaper. It also makes things more uniform and legible, which will be useful moving forward. George Eastman invented a lightweight camera in 1888, and there was photography prior to this time, but cameras were really bulky. It was very expensive and photography was not an everyday occurrence. With Eastman's new invention, his new camera, that means ordinary people are more likely to start using them. They're lightweight, they're just easier to manage and use and handle. This is going to obviously affect the way we evolve through today, when we all basically have a camera in our pocket on our phones at all times. Moving on to automobiles. So the automobile was invented in Europe in the late 1800s, but it was so expensive to make that many people just couldn't afford one. It wasn't a realistic mode of transportation. Not many people could have it. That changes when Henry Ford comes along here in America and decides to mass produce cars using the assembly line. We're going to be looking at this a lot in class over these next few days, and really throughout this unit as a whole. But an assembly line is a manufacturing method in which a product is put together piece by piece as it moves along conveyor belts. A conveyor belt is similar to, you could think of it like the moving sidewalks that are in some subway stations, or, like the treadmill belt. It moves on its own. The use of the assembly line sliced production time in half and lowered costs for people who wanted to buy cars. And this makes them a lot more accessible for the everyday man based on whatever his or her income is. I believe this is the last one. It is the last one for today. So, another important invention at this time, Wilbur and Orville Wright, brothers from North Carolina, flew the first gas-powered airplane in 1903. And on that day, they flew 4 times, but they never stayed in the air for more than a minute at a time. And for the most part, people were really unimpressed with the airplane at like when it was first introduced. So whoop-de-doo, these 2 guys could fly in the air for a minute. Like, how is that ever going to benefit anyone, was basically the idea that people had. Over time, especially thanks to World War I and the way planes were used there, which we'll look at in the future, people came to see that airplanes could be valuable. First, they really saw it at a military level, and later they would see how the gas-powered airplane could change their lives on a greater scale. That is it for Chapter 18, Section 1. We'll be diving into a lot of this more deeply in class, and I will see you tomorrow. Adios.